big global story that the world has its eye on is tensions between Ukraine and Russia, even as sporadic instances are being reported since this morning of shelling in parts of Ukraine. Now, the concerns from the West, especially the United States and NATO, is that Russia will use these instances as an excuse to invade Ukraine, something that they've been saying all this time they have no intention of doing. But the reiteration of this stance has come once again from Joe Biden as well as Boris Johnson of the United Kingdom. Let me now go across to Sushant Sareen for more on this. He is the Strategic Affairs Analyst and Senior Fellow at ORF. Sushant, great to speak with you today. What is your assessment of the situation? It seems like there is no way that the United States, the UK and NATO are ready to take Putin at his word. If he's saying he's not going to invade, they don't believe him at all.
And neither does Mr. Putin believe the NATO leadership that they have no intention of threatening the US by, making Ukraine a part of NATO. And that is really the nub of the problem. So, yes, there is this whole issue of mistrust and distrust between the two sides. But having said that, the current situation is a bit like a yo-yo, because a couple of days back, it seemed that maybe the tensions are just easing a little bit and diplomacy might come into its own. And now suddenly we see, the pendulum swing the other side, and tensions seem to be mounting on a daily basis. And the saber rattling which is happening, both through proxies, because at one level, the parts of Ukraine which are under the occupation of the Russian-speaking lot or the secessionist parts, these guys are claiming that the Ukrainians are carrying out a genocide or are carrying out operations. The Ukrainians are complaining that these fellows are firing shells on them. So there is that sideshow kind of a thing which is happening, which could escalate into something more. But the important question is that does Russia have the kind of troop levels that are required for invading a country as big as Ukraine? If you're talking about 150,000 troops, is that going to be adequate to launch a full-scale invasion? Or are we just talking about skirmishes along the border? Secondly, I think there has been a bit of brinkmanship even from the Western side. And which serves them in a sense, it serves the Americans, who have made it very clear that they will not put boots on the ground to fight the war against Russia in Ukraine. That Ukraine will pretty much be on its own in the event that the Russians invade. They'll assist the Ukrainians, but they will not fight on the side of the Ukrainians. Which leaves the Ukrainians middle of nowhere. It leaves them hanging. But I think from a Western perspective, or at least from an American perspective, it does help, because any such action by Russia will then mean that people who are then questioning, or till not too long back questioning, the entire transatlantic partnership between Europe and the US, will want the Americans to play a bigger role in Europe than what they were moving towards. So I think there is a bit of gamesmanship on both sides. We are back in the world of that old world which everybody had assumed is all over and that geoeconomics is taking over. I'm afraid that we are back in that era of geopolitics and geostrategy. We are back in the era of spheres of influence and creating buffer zones, which is what this whole issue is about.
No, but Sushant, I just want to understand the public posturing which is coming in, especially from the White House administration, from POTUS, now today even Boris Johnson chiming in. If you are truly trying to diffuse a situation, why carry on with such strong public announcements, repeated warnings on what you're going to do next? That is not how any kind of communication or diplomacy actually works. Do you think that there are other aspects to why the United States is so front and center on this?
Yeah, which is precisely the point, that if you actually want diplomacy to work, then you had an opportunity a couple of days back for both sides to start stepping back. And just when it seemed that that might just start happening, you see a flurry of statements coming out of Washington, coming out of London, coming out of some of the other European capitals, and then the Russians responding in kind. And the Russians are not backing down because they see Ukraine as a vital interest, and for understandable reasons, just as Ukraine has its own sovereign decisions to make. But then, that's what these situations are all about. That every side has a story and every side has a valid story. But at the end of the day, you have to find some kind of a middle ground so that, those stories don't clash with each other and hostilities don't break out. Because if that happens, then all bets are off. Then will that thing remain limited to a tiny corner of Ukraine, or even will it remain limited to just Ukraine, or will it then escalate into a wider conflict? Do the Europeans want a wider conflict? I have serious doubts on that, because that will bring complete devastation all across, apart from how it affects the rest of the globe. I don't think anybody is interested in that. And yet there is this game of brinkmanship which is playing, which is now entering into a very dangerous territory, especially after the kind of skirmishes and clashes which have been reported since last night, or the last two nights. And that, takes you further up the escalation ladder. And I don't know which side is going to back down, or how both sides are going to decide that they're going to back down, together, so that neither side loses face. But I think losing face is a very important part of this whole thing. I don't think Mr. Putin can afford to lose face, and I don't think Mr. Biden can afford to lose face after having, with all the strident rhetoric which has come from both sides. So I don't know how they're going to back down from this. But if they don't back down, and if this continues to escalate, then I guess we are all in trouble.
Well, it's a situation we need to watch very, very closely. Thank you so much, Sushant, for joining us and putting all of these points into perspective. It's something that the markets will be watching come Monday as well.